child star to political activist to film director. By the time she was 8 years old, Sarah Polley was a Canadian star. Who could forget Road to Avonlea?
She confided in me. It was love at first sight.
By 12, she was reportedly blacklisted by Disney. Why? Well, for wearing a peace symbol to a White House dinner during the First Gulf War. After escaping child stardom, Polley quit acting in high school to become an activist, speaking at rallies, getting 2 teeth knocked out by riot police at a protest. Then at the age of 17, she returned to acting, and she starred in Adam Agoyan's critically acclaimed picture, The Sweet Hereafter. That got her a Genie nomination for Best Actress. After that, she walked out on the role that made Kate Hudson almost famous, and instead opted for films like Go, No Such Thing, Dawn of the Dead, Beowulf and Grendel, and her latest film is called Away From Her.
Action!
Away From Her is her directorial debut. It's a story about an elderly couple torn apart by Alzheimer's, and it opens in Toronto and Vancouver on May the 4th. Here's a clip.
Bill, I'm your husband. Fiona, it's Grant. We've been married for 45 years. Look at me, Fiona. That is not your sweater. We've had a good life together. Those are your words, Fiona, not mine. That is not your sweater.
So you've got this big movie that's opening.
Yes.
Are you excited about it?
I'm very excited about it. Yes.
Yeah?
It's a small movie, and so it's really exciting that it's actually going to have a bit of life and actually be released in more than one theater in downtown Toronto. So I'm thrilled with that.
When you go into making a picture, do you have an idea of where it's going to go? Did you know that this was going to kind of have those sort of legs, or do you have to wait till the film's done?
No, I mean, I've been involved in Canadian film for my whole life, so you accept that the natural trajectory of a Canadian film is you are for 1 week at one theater in Toronto.
And then at 2 really cool video stores in Vancouver, and that's it.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's completely a surprise and a great bonus and absolutely thrilling that it's actually going to kind of get out there and be given a shot. So. You
know, but a lot of people who make those sorts of films kind of have to. You don't really have to. You make a conscious decision that this is the kind of movie you want to make in Canada. These are your choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it was the most ideal environment to make a film in as a filmmaker and also as an actor. I mean, there's so much more creative control in this country, and the less money you have, the more creative control you have. So, for me, it's the perfect environment to make films in.
You know, I mean, I really like this movie. It was there were times, because it's set in the winter, where it was just a bummer, and Gordon Pinsent looked so depressed.
Well, you should be our marketing executive. This is like really fine work you're doing.
This movie will bum you out, but it will totally motivate you. No, but what it did was it showed a tenderness and a sexuality in a relationship in the over 50 crowd you don't see. And I think for a lot of people who aren't at that age can look at it and maybe see some of their parents in there, or people who are older can see some of their kids in there. It was just a really neat relationship. Why make this one?
Well, I think, you know, for that reason, I mean, I was at the beginning of a relationship when I first read this short story, and for me it was the most complex and interesting and difficult love story I'd ever read, and certainly the one that's moved me the most in my life. And it was very interesting for me to look at a relationship after 44 years when I was at the very beginning of one. So for me it was it's very much a love story more than anything else. So
I kind of chuckle when I read about I don't really chuckle, I laugh when I read about people saying Sarah Polley made a decision to stay in Canada, which, as if that's a political statement in and of itself. Did it feel like that to you?
At times it has, and at other times I've had to admit to myself that actually this is just the best life for me. I mean, I'm really passionate about Canadian films. I love living here. I love living in Toronto, and it would be a big sacrifice for me to move somewhere else. So I find it funny when sometimes people talk about it as though it's this big sacrifice I've made out of integrity to stay where I happen to love living around my friends and family and, you know, work on things I really like working on. It's like, yeah, and I guess you could sort of take up that mantle and be really obnoxious about it. Maybe I'll do that. Don't you think that's great that I'm doing that for you, George?
Amazing. Amazing. You're not doing that for me.
Pretty obnoxious. Yeah.
No, but you still do stuff. You could dabble as much as you want, I guess, elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been lucky that way, that I've been able to work with filmmakers on both sides of the border that I really admire. So, you
know, much has been made about the English Canada model and how the English Canada model is ineffective, certainly compared to the French Canadian model and the American model, even the British model to an extent. Is there something wrong with the English-Canadian model, or is this just who we are as in terms of the entertainment and the star system?
I feel like I could talk about that for 3 hours, and I think I will.
How long do you have, Kevin? Kevin, how long do we have? Like a minute? Give me 30 seconds.
I'm going to try to give you 30 seconds. I think English-Canadian independent films don't actually do that badly compared to independent English films and independent American films. Like, we're comparing ourselves to giant commercial films with $100 million marketing budgets. We're never going to compete with that. So there's a lot of work for us to do because Canadians right now do not have access to their own films, and that's a very big problem. We're not hearing about them. We're not seeing about them on TV. We're not able to access them in our theaters. So that's a huge problem, and it needs to get addressed on a myriad of levels.
Come back again, and well talk about that exclusively.
No, I'm going to keep going.
We'll do it in the commercial break. Sarah, Polley, everybody, we are. We'll be right back.
Can you describe the whole story in your own words?
What? The entire story? I guess I better pee first.
I'm interested in the way we tell stories about our lives, about the fact that the truth about the past is often ephemeral and difficult to pin down.
Well, I guess if you could start by describing Mom in as much detail as possible.
My memory of Mom is she was a fun person at parties, that she laughed loud.
Michael was a private person, and Diane was not a private person. She yearned for more.
She was very warm, you know, full of life. But I do think it's really interesting to look at this one thing that happened and how it's refracted in so many different ways.
What I overheard was Mom saying that she was pregnant and that she wasn't sure who the father was.
I was like 13, and my sister first told me, you know, your dad's probably not your real dad.
I remember we talked about how you didn't look like Dad, and Dad joked about it.
Someone thought your father might be someone that Mom had acted with in a play.
You might want to meet up with Harry Golkin. He can probably shed more light on the possibility of your mother having had an affair with a member of the cast.
You asked him the question, have you ever heard anything about my mom having had an affair?
Was it Tom or Wayne or Jeff?
Was there ever anything romantic in your relationship with Mom, or was it always just friendship?
What about you? I sat there in abject silence. My God, we've been joking about all this stuff for years. Forget about me.
She spent her whole life looking for love, and I remember feeling really happy that she had found love and that she'd been loved that much.
Is this the tsunami she unleashed when she went? And all of us still flailing in her wake.
What about how ironic it is that the final revelation and its aftermath have brought Sarah and I closer together. What about us?
So I wanted to tell the story in a way that included everyone's version and everyone's experience of it, and to not exclude anything. And so doing interviews about the film before people saw the film seemed like kind of a waste of 5 years, because then that version I was going to talk about at the beginning was going to somehow blot out the mess of this story, which is ultimately what I wanted to make a film about. I wanted to make a film about the mess of storytelling that happens.
Did you? I mean, you know, documentaries are unscripted and therefore have a way of naturally transforming and establishing their focus as they get made, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the film that you thought you were setting out to make?
I thought that I was making a film about. I did set out to make a film about stories, about how we need to tell them, about how necessary it is for us to make sense of our bewildering lives, to create a narrative around it, and to be able to have something to grasp onto.
But you could not have known that different family members would be bringing different stories. I mean, was that must have been a surprise to you, that the range of stories told around one particular story it becomes the subtext of the film, right?
And certainly there were more stories than I expected, but I think a lot of the inspiration for the film was listening to people's third and fourth hand accounts of the story who were hearing totally different stories of the same events, because all of us were either hearing things wrong or remembering things wrong, and all of us had disputes about what was exactly the right set of facts and what wasn't. And it was amazing to me that one set of events could affect so many people so differently, and that there could be so many
contradictions as well as ways that our stories were feeding each other to inform our relationship to, I think, the central character in the film, who's my mother for me.
See, what's interesting about, I mean, this film is about searching for your father, but it's a love letter to your mother, it feels, as well. Were you worried that your memory of her would be affected by what you might learn in searching for the truth about your father, finding out about her affair, etc.?
You know, I think that I definitely had concerns about how my memories of her would be affected, but more so in terms of when you're shaping a film and all of a sudden you're creating a character out of the people who have been closest to you. I think when that person's no longer living, there is a danger, you know, is this character I'm going to create somehow blot out the person she was? So I guess the key to that was including as many of the contradictory versions of her as I could so that there was no definitive her. And I think that's the thing is, my sister talks about this in the film really eloquently, that idea of who she really was is ephemeral. I mean, there is no state of affairs we can ever pin down. There's many versions, and we never get to that.
Does the political climate affect what you want to make as art? Like, has it made you double down on certain things? Talk about
100%.
what.
So I feel like, actually, Cameron Bailey made a speech at the Toronto Film Critics Awards last year or this year, where he just sort of issued this challenge to everybody in the audience who was able to raise money for films. So like, this Moonlight was made for $6 million. Like, I challenge anyone who can raise that money. Like, what are you making a film about? Like, in these times, what are you making a film about? And you know, it had been a feeling that had been encroaching on me for a long time, but it helped clarify it for me that, like, these aren't frivolous times, and if you have political things to say or to make, this isn't the time to hold back. It's not the time to be polite. It's not the time to choose to make the thing that's best for your career.
Filmmaker Sarah Polley wrote the essay, which was published in the New York Times on Saturday, called "The Men You Meet Making Movies." In it, she discusses her encounter with Harvey Weinstein as a young actress and her experiences in the film industry. Polley, whose adaptation of Margaret Atwood's Alias Grace will come to Netflix next month, described encounters with men in the industry as a young actress in which she was repeatedly, in her words, humiliated, violated, and dismissed.
Right. And what advice would you have for someone who's just starting out?
Like, as a filmmaker?
Yeah, or as an actor, as a filmmaker, as a screenwriter, and any one of the...
I think you have to be careful of doing things just for the sake of opening doors. I think there's a lot of talk when you first start out about do this because it'll open a lot of doors. But I think if it's something you don't actually feel passionate about, now there's a financial incentive too, which I think, like, people also have to make a living. So I don't begrudge anybody opening a door they don't really believe in because they have to make a living. That's fine. But I think when you get into the habit of opening doors for the sake of it, those are followed by other doors that you're also opening just for the sake of opening doors, and it's very, very easy. And the process of losing the thread of what you wanted to do in the first place and why you wanted to do it is very easy to lose that thread. It happens a lot quicker than you think it's gonna happen. So, and I think that the getting on the train of money, getting on the train of fame, is extremely hard to get off of it. And I think I've had glimmers of that in my career where I've been like, well, why don't I just do this one thing? And then that thing leads to another thing. And it's a big wrenching process to get yourself back to, I don't need that. I want to do something I believe in and care about. It's really, really hard. Which isn't to say you can't have a really great life, you know, just by like making money, but probably if you go into the arts, that isn't what you set out to do in the first place. And I think that you may look back, like, in years to come thinking like you made the decision for the wrong reason. So I would say doing things that you believe in is really important, not trying to open too many doors for the sake of it. And I think as much as possible, writing things and developing things on spec is a really good idea. Like, not involving people too early in the process, especially with those first few projects where, you know, you're really expressing something that's coming very, very deep within you.
Was there a particular pivot that you made away from something towards something?
I feel like I've made a few pivots.
Did you see yourself going in the wrong direction and yank yourself back?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like, I had a concussion like a year and a half ago, and certainly having many months in bed in the dark to think was not such a bad thing. And it really reminded me of like why I wanted to start doing this. And how was I going to feel in 20 years, and what do I want to look back and say I've done. And I think I made the segue again to kind of focusing much more on my own work than I had been, and making sure that what I was doing had something to say, that it wasn't just another movie. I mean, we're drowning in content right now. Like, a lot of people can make a well-crafted, good TV show or film. So I think if you're going to add to noise, especially in this political climate, like, you want it to have something to say that you actually think is worth talking about.
Oh, I can't wait to see what you do next.
Oh, thanks.
Thank
What
you
if it's
so
really
much.
bad now? What if everything's
You're
really,
allowed to do
really
that
crappy?
too.
Yeah.
Everybody's allowed. You can't do anything if you're not risking failure.